bullied child walked into a storm, a cafe, and the moment that would change her life forever. A crack of thunder shook the windows, and before you even realize what's happening, rain is blasting the sidewalk like the sky just snapped. So if you love emotional stories where bullies get exposed and hearts get healed, hit that like button right now, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment saying, "I believe in kindness," because this story is about to hit you hard. And it starts inside a crowded downtown cafe where people were packed in shoulder to shoulder, wet umbrellas dripping everywhere, coffee machines hissing like they were stressed out too, and right in the middle of that chaos stood a tiny 8-year-old girl with soaked brown curls stuck to her cheeks and a shiny silver prosthetic leg peeking out from under her torn leggings, while grown folks kept staring like she was some kind of problem nobody wanted to deal with. And you could tell she was scared, but trying not to cry as she moved from table to table, asking in a shaky little voice if she could sit for just a minute, only to be ignored or laughed at by people who had more coffee than compassion, and some dude in a suit even muttered loud enough for everyone to hear that she was probably begging for money, which made a few people snicker. And that's when she looked down at her leg and wiped her eyes like she was used to this kind of cruelty, even though no kid should ever have to get used to it. And every time someone shook their head at her, her shoulders drooped a little more, until finally she reached the back corner where a tall black man sat alone, hoodie pulled low, hands wrapped around a plain cup of coffee, looking like he'd been up since forever. And nobody in that cafe knew that his name was Marcus, a single dad who had been awake since sunrise after dropping off his sick son at his sister's place before heading to a double shift at the warehouse, carrying not just exhaustion but a heavy memory he never talked about. Because years ago his own little girl had died after a car accident took her leg and then her life, and even though he tried to move on, some days that pain came back like a punch to the chest, especially when he saw a child hurting. So when he noticed this soaked little girl standing in front of him nervously clutching her backpack straps, his heart skipped a beat, and she whispered, "Excuse me, sir, can I sit here?" like she was afraid even asking might get her yelled at. And for a second the whole cafe felt like it went quiet, even though it was still loud, because people were watching, waiting to see what he'd do. And Marcus looked up slowly, seeing not just a stranger but a scared kid who reminded him of everything he lost, and instead of shooing her away or acting awkward like everyone else, he gave her the softest smile and said, "Yeah, baby, you can sit right here," and you could literally feel the tension drop as she climbed into the chair across from him, setting her backpack down carefully like she didn't want to bother anyone. And as soon as she sat, some lady across the cafe rolled her eyes and whispered something rude to her friend, but Marcus heard it and his jaw tightened, because he was tired of people being ugly for no reason, and he leaned forward a little and asked the girl what her name was, and she said it was Lily and that she had just come from the hospital because the rain started when her mom was inside paying a bill, and she didn't want to get in trouble for getting wet. And when she said it, her voice cracked and Marcus felt that familiar ache in his chest, so he slid his napkin over to her and told her she was doing just fine, and Lily smiled for the first time since walking in, showing a tiny gap in her teeth. But even with that sweet moment, the bullying didn't stop, because a group of teenagers by the window started whispering and laughing, one of them pointing at her leg and saying something that made her flinch. And Marcus could see the way her eyes dropped like she was shrinking into herself, and that's when he knew he wasn't about to let this slide, not today, not ever, because sometimes the universe puts people together for a reason, and he wasn't about to ignore it, especially when this kid looked like she needed someone to have her back. And as the rain kept pounding against the glass and the cafe stayed buzzing, a quiet storm was about to break that nobody in that room was ready for. And Lily had no idea that the man she just sat down with was about to change her life in a way she could never imagine. Lily sat there swinging her good foot nervously while the cafe noise kept crashing around her, cups clinking and people talking like nothing important was happening, but to her it felt like the whole room was staring, and Marcus noticed the way her fingers kept picking at the loose thread on her sleeve like she was trying not to cry, so he gently asked her if she wanted some hot chocolate, and her eyes lit up for half a second before she shook her head and said she didn't have any money, which made his chest tighten again, so he told her it was on him and ordered one anyway, and when the waitress brought it over, some guy behind them scoffed and said real loud that people shouldn't be bringing broken kids into nice places, and Lily froze like she'd been slapped, her face going pale, and Marcus turned slowly, that tired look in his eyes shifting into something sharp, and he said, calm but firm, "You got something you wanna say again?" And the guy looked away real quick like he suddenly forgot how to talk, and that tiny moment made Lily sit up a little straighter, because for once someone wasn't letting people talk trash about her, and as she took a small sip of the hot chocolate, Marcus asked her how she lost her leg, and she told him in a quiet voice about a drunk driver who ran a red light, how she woke up in the hospital scared and hurting, and how kids at school started calling her robot and tin can after she came back, and Marcus listened to every word, his jaw tight, because he'd lived that nightmare from the other side, and he told her that she was strong, stronger than most grown-ups he knew, and she smiled shyly, but then the bullies in the cafe weren't done yet, because one of the teens by the window decided to get bold and loudly joked about her being a pirate missing a leg, and a few people laughed, and Lily's eyes filled with tears, and she tried to hide it by looking down, but Marcus wasn't having it, so he stood up slowly, all 6 feet of him, and the room started to go quiet, because there was something about the way he moved that made people pay attention, and he said, "You think making fun of a kid who survived something you couldn't handle makes you funny?" And nobody answered, and the teen turned red, and Marcus kept going, telling them that Lily was braver than anyone in that room, that she faced pain and still walked in here with her head up, and that if anyone had a problem with her, they had a problem with him, and suddenly the energy shifted, because bullies are loud until somebody stands up to them, and Lily stared at him like he was some kind of superhero, and when he sat back down, she whispered thank you, and he just nodded, but inside he was thinking about his daughter, about how he wished someone had protected her the way he was protecting Lily now, and just when things felt a little calmer, the cafe door swung open and a soaked woman rushed in, calling Lily's name, and Lily jumped up and ran to her mom, hugging her tight, and her mom apologized over and over for leaving her, explaining she was trying to get help paying for Lily's therapy, and Marcus watched them with a heavy heart, but then Lily pulled her mom over to his table and proudly said, "This is the man who saved me," and her mom looked at him with tired, grateful eyes, and before Marcus could even respond, the same rude lady from earlier suddenly spoke up, saying that maybe she judged too fast, and one by one people in the cafe started looking ashamed, realizing they had just watched a kid get bullied and did nothing, and that was when Marcus did something that shocked everyone even more, because he reached into his wallet and pulled out a card, handing it to Lily's mom and saying she should call him about getting Lily the best care possible, and her eyes widened when she saw his last name, because she recognized it from the news. And in that moment the whole cafe realized the quiet man they ignored was actually someone who had the power to change lives, and Lily squeezed his hand, not knowing exactly why everyone was suddenly acting different, only that she felt safe for the first time all day. The cafe felt completely different now, like the air itself had shifted, and people who had been whispering and laughing just minutes earlier were suddenly sitting there looking real small, because when Lily's mom realized Marcus was the same Marcus everyone talked about in business magazines, the self-made guy who built a massive shipping company from nothing after losing everything, including his little girl, Her hands started shaking as she thanked him, and Marcus gently told her that titles and money didn't matter right now, only Lily did, and Lily looked up at him with those big hopeful eyes and asked if he really thought she was brave, and he smiled and told her she was a warrior, the kind that keeps fighting even when it hurts, and hearing that made her chest puff up with pride, because she'd been treated like she was broken for so long that she forgot she was still whole. And the bullies who had made fun of her earlier were now staring at their phones like they wanted to disappear, especially when Marcus stood up again and said out loud that every single person in that room had a choice to either lift someone up or tear them down, and today most of them chose wrong, and nobody had anything smart to say back, because deep down they knew he was right, and Lily's mom hugged Marcus, tears running down her face as she whispered that she'd been struggling alone for so long, and Marcus told her she wasn't alone anymore, because sometimes strangers walk into your life for a reason, and the rain outside started to slow down like the storm was finally letting up, and Lily asked if she could hug him too, and Marcus knelt down so she could wrap her tiny arms around his neck, and in that moment he felt a piece of his heart he thought was gone come back to life, and as they pulled apart, Lily reached into her backpack and gave him a crumpled drawing she had made, a picture of a man and a little girl holding hands in the rain, and Marcus had to blink hard to keep from crying, because it looked a lot like the daughter he lost, and the whole cafe was silent, watching this emotional scene unfold, and even the waitress was wiping her eyes, and Marcus told Lily that no matter what people say, she should always remember that she's enough just the way she is, and Lily nodded like she was locking those words into her heart forever, and before leaving, Marcus paid for every single person's coffee in that place. Not because they deserved it, but because he wanted to show them what kindness looked like, and that act hit harder than any lecture could, and people started quietly apologizing to Lily and her mom, realizing how wrong they had been, and as they walked out into the now gentle rain, Lily looked back at Marcus and waved, and he waved back, knowing this wasn't really goodbye, because some connections are too strong to just disappear, and true enough, weeks later Lily started getting the therapy she needed, and Marcus stayed in touch, showing up to her school play, cheering louder than anyone else, and proving that even a broken past can lead to something beautiful, and this story wasn't just about a bullied little girl or a lonely single dad, it was about how one simple question, "Can I sit here?" turned into a moment that changed so many hearts. So if this story touched you even a little bit, make sure you hit like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to remember that kindness still exists, and drop a comment telling us about a time a stranger showed you love when you needed it most, because your story might be the one that changes someone else's life.